My name is Sasha Coelho on behalf of my team, Professor Christina Sanchez-Stockhammer, Sascha Kaden, Marina Beccard, and Professor Florian Röhrbein. I'm going to present our paper, Do We Mitigate Face-Threatening Acts Even When Communicating with Faceless Robots? Politeness Strategies in Human-Robot versus Human-Human Interaction. This is a collaborative project at the Chemnitz University of Technology between English and Digital Linguistics and the Department of Neurorobotics. So I'm going to start my presentation with a meme. And maybe you've read this meme before. I found it on Reddit. It says, "Hey, Google, play us some music, please. Why are you being so polite? Just in case." And then the last slide says, "Keep that one alive. He always said please." So, why did we want to study politeness in human-robot interaction? Because, first of all, politeness is a fundamental aspect of human communication. It governs our social interaction patterns, and it helps us maintain our relationships. It represents a core component of our human behavior, and we constantly make choices about how and when to use politeness strategies to navigate our social conversation. So, which is why, as a group, we asked ourselves the question in today's technology driven world where we are using generative AI or we're using robots or we're communicating in some form or another with an artificial agent, do us humans, do we extend these politeness strategies to non-anthropomorphic artificial agents? And for our study, we started with our basis of Brown and Levinson's model of politeness. Um, this model is based on Goffman's concept of face, which is our public self-image, and it says that every member of society seeks to maintain their face. Brown and Levinson's model says politeness consists of two components: the negative face and the positive face. The negative phase is our desire of freedom from action and freedom from imposition. And the positive phase is our need to be liked, need to be approved, and need to be appreciated by others. In every interaction that a human performs, the speaker has some form of face threatening act. And at every point, the speaker is trying to manage their face and the social harmony. So now in this study, we analyzed requests. Why did we choose requests? Because when you request somebody to do something for you, one, it is a face-threatening act. And secondly, it imposes on your negative face. So according to Searle's speech act theory, a request is a type of a directive. In this case, you are attempting to get the hearer to do something for you. And we impose on the hearer's negative face. That is, we are imposing on the person's desire for freedom or desire to do whatever they want. What has already been done in the field of politeness in human-robot interaction? Kumar et al. He did a study. They did a study with 30 participants. Most of their participants were students, but they also had older adults. And their findings showed that they asked participants to interact with robots that had 3 levels of politeness, not very polite, and 2 other levels of politeness. And they found that people preferred interacting with a polite robot. Ramchandran and Lim also did a study where there was a nursing robot, and the nursing robot was polite and or not polite, and the polite nursing robot increased the user's perception of trustworthiness and acceptability of using a robot in a caregiving setting. Then Williams et al. Did a study on the effect of wake words. Wake words are when you say, "Hey Siri," "Hey Alexa," and the Alexa or Siri start, because it is assumed that they're not listening to you the whole time. But the minute you wake them up by saying, "Hey Siri" or "Hey Alexa," that's when it starts. And they they tested "Hey Pepper" versus "Excuse me Pepper," and the results suggested that when you prime the polite "Excuse me Pepper," humans are more likely to interact politely with a robot. Now, apart from Williams et al., all the other studies tested politeness from the robot's point of view, whether the robot was polite with the human. Now, what we did in our study is we analyzed every interaction between the human and the robot. We tested two hypotheses. Our first hypothesis is due to the inherent asymmetry between humans and robots in terms of power and social dynamics. We expect differences in frequency and type of head act strategies. Specifically, more polite language is predicted in human-human interaction versus human-robot. What are head act strategies I'm going to talk about? And then in our second hypothesis is the use of internal modifiers, which are words like please, or a little bit, or please, little bit, small, are expected to be higher in human-human interaction versus human-robot interaction. Now, what we did a Wizard of Oz study. And in our study, we used the Franca robotic arm, which is a non-anthropomorphic robot. It is only a robot arm that has the capacity of 2 kgs. And we had 13 adult native German speakers. Three of them worked with a human partner. So there were 3 groups of 6 humans each, and 7 of them worked together with a robot. Their task was to build an IKEA shelf together. It was a small, simple IKEA shelf, and their task was to build it together with their partner. So in this case, the partner is either a human or a robot. The Franca F3 robotic arm was used. And since it was a Wizard of Oz study, there were 2 wizards in the background that telemanipulated the robot. There was a green screen, so nobody could see that they were sitting in the background. The 2 wizards telemanipulated the robot using a 3D mouse. We had cameras, so we could see every movement, 3 cameras, so we could see every movement of the participant. And we used not real to play predefined, or we could also add our own semi-predefined statements via the app Not Real, the software Not Real. We collected audio and video recordings. These audio recordings were then transcribed using NextGen, which is from the University of Mittweida. And these transcriptions were then annotated. Now, in the first analysis of this, we annotated the transcripts for speech acts, that is Searle's category of speech acts, which are assertives, directives, like if you ask a question, if you talk about the status, or if you're requesting something. In this study, we only took the requests. We only took the directives because we wanted to see how humans make requests towards a robot and how they make requests towards another human. The annotation schema followed Ackerman's 2023 paper. Her annotation was based on the Cross-Cultural Speech Act Realization Project, which is also called the CCSARP, which was by Bloom Kulka et al. Now, in this CCSARP, this Cross-Cultural Speech Act Realization Project, they distinguished between 3 levels of politeness. In a head act strategy, a head act is the main statement. For example, if I say, darling, close the door, then darling is the external modifier and close the door is the head act, the main act. So we focused only on the head act. So there are 3 levels of the head act, which are direct, which is close the window, conventionally indirect, which leaves some room for a no, could you please close the window, and non-conventionally indirect, which are mostly hints. Why is the window open, or it's getting cold in here? Where you're using your shared knowledge, but you're not exactly telling the person to close the door. Now, in our paper, we annotated in our paper, we annotated whether the head act was direct, whether it was conventionally indirect, or whether it was non-conventionally indirect. Now, since ours was a different scenario where where humans are interacting with robots and other humans, we also had to add a fourth category, which is questions requiring a verbal response. For example, these were not requests, but these were questions which are, is everything okay? Or should I do something? So we had four categories: direct, conventionally indirect, non-conventionally indirect, and questions requiring verbal responses. Now, and the first category is the direct category, which is close the window. This direct category was further subdivided into imperatives, close the close the window, or must statements, you must close the window, or want statement, I want to close the window, should statement, you should close the window, or a declarative statement, which is that is enough. Now, this was called impositive. It was the most direct category. The second category is called the conventionally indirect category, which is normally in German, you always say the can you plus verb. Can you open the window? Can you close the window? Can you hold the leg? In this category, we had three subcategories: the ability question, can you give this to me? An ability statement, you can give this to me, and a yes and no question. Now, everything that is in dark green has been taken from Ackermann's 2023 paper, and everything that is light green has been added by us so that it fits our dialogue. And our last category was the non-conventionally indirect, where you don't exactly say what you want, but you use common knowledge. We had three subcategories over here, which was a willingness question. If you could please hold this rod, or a possibility question, can it be tightened here, or a possibility statement. These were the head act categories that we analyzed. And then we had our last category, which is questions requiring a verbal response. In this, we had two subcategories. Either the speaker is asking for some information, or the speaker is giving some instructions. There were several subcategories of informations, but since the numbers were so small, we grouped them into one and we called it an information request. Because these are not requests, these are more like somebody is asking for an information or is giving an instruction. For example, is everything okay? Would you like me to build this vertically or horizontally? Or can you somehow, you know what I mean, build it like this? After we annotated the head act, so in this case, after we annotated, can you close the window? We also looked if these head acts had any internal modifiers. Internal modifiers can be added to a head act to make the sentence softer. For example, can you close the window? An internal modifier would be the subjunctive, which is could you close the window? It leaves room open um, to make the request a little milder. Then we also had, so we had the subjunctive, we had the down toner, which is could you maybe close the window? We had an understater, which is could you quickly close the window? And then we had the politeness marker, which is please, could you please close the window? Now, this was the annotation schema that we used. Now I'm going to talk about the results. So first I'm going to talk about the head act strategies, which was the direct impositive, the conditionally indirect, non-conventionally indirect, and the questions requiring verbal responses. On the left hand side is the diagram, and on the right hand side we have the raw counts as well as the percentages. So the everything everything in green is human, and the is human group, and what is in gray is the human robot group. If you look at the impositives, which are the close the window, we had in the human robot conversation, the most amount of dialogues were the impositives, which were the direct. Could you hold this, or could you close the window, or could you screw this in? Whereas in human-human conversation, the highest amount was questions requiring verbal responses. Should I hold it like this, or should I put this vertically, or should I put this horizontally? Then in the human-human condition, we also had impositives and we had non-conventionally indirect. Since the impositives were the highest, we also conducted a chi-square, which showed that the difference between the impositives in the human-human condition and in the human-human robot condition was significant. And because of these significant results, we also looked into further subcategories of the impositives. In the paper, we have looked into the subcategories of all, but over here, I'm only mentioning the most interesting results. If you look at the imperative, which was close it or open it or hold this, the highest in the human robot conversation, there was a high amount of imperatives, which is 47% in the imperative as well as the imperative ellipsis. And we used ellipsis for sentences where it was not exactly clear what the form was, but the sentence was still clear. In the human condition also, there were a high amount of imperatives, but the counts were relatively low. If you look here, there are 97 imperatives, and if you look in 190 imperatives, if you calculate these two together, and over here it's about 12. In the human robot condition, another high amount was in the declarative sentence, which was do this or do that. Then we also looked at the internal modifiers, where if you'd use like, could you please open the door, or could you maybe open the door, or could you open the door quickly? What we found here, however, is there were a more number of internal modifiers used in the human robot condition than in the human condition. In the human robot condition, there were internal modifiers used together with non-conventionally indirect sentences, with the impositives as well as the conventionally indirect. What led us to our discussion was the predominance of impositives, which are the relatively direct requests, suggests that robots were seen as a subordinate collaborator. The focus was more on efficiency and task completion over protecting the face of the robot. It also aligns with Brown and Levinson's theory that says politeness varies with social distance and power. Whereas in human-human communication, there was greater use of questions requiring a verbal response and a mix of the other strategies. There was a heightened sensitivity to interpersonal dynamics and face management. There were a few limitations of this study. First of all, it was a Wizard of Oz study. That means that there was somebody controlling the robot, and the robot's utterances were partially pre-scripted. Second of all, our sample size was really small, which limits the generalizability of the study. However, it still provides insights into human-robot interaction design and contributes to research in politeness in human-robot interaction. The differences in human-human and human-robot interaction suggest that there is a social hierarchy that influences our linguistic behavior. And there were several politeness markers that were used in human-robot communication, which also indicates that our politeness norms that we have been brought up with are partially extended to artificial agents. These are the references that have been used in this study. Thank you for your attention. And if you have any questions,